Imagine for a moment, at the end of the day, you have absolutely nowhere to sleep tonight. You have no family or friends whose couch you can crash on. You've lost most of your belongings and only have with you what you can carry. What's most precious or irreplaceable? Did you pack these things or more practical items? You have no cash, no credit cards, no bank account, and no car. You have not yet eaten today. As the sun begins to set and the temperature falls, it then begins to rain. You are hungry, exhausted, and scared. And you have 2 children with you. You are homeless. This might seem unimaginable to you, but it happens every day here in our community. Despite the fact that we live in an amazing community with cultural, historical, and culinary attractions that thousands flock to visit every year, we do have a problem with homelessness. It's unlikely if you were to walk downtown that you would see anyone sleeping on the street in our town. But homelessness can be very invisible. Tonight there will be hundreds of people who are sleeping either doubled up, sleeping somewhere not meant for human habitation like a vehicle, sleeping in a shelter, or even sleeping outside. An attempt is made each year to count the number of people who are homeless in our country and our community. Last year, over 578,000 people nationally were counted in something called a point-in-time count, which attempts to count people who are both sheltered and unsheltered in our country. In New Hampshire, that number was just over 2,200. Nearly 5,000 people stayed in shelters in New Hampshire last year, and almost 900 of them were children. This is Crossroads House, a 96-bed privately run shelter here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where I'm the executive director. We've been providing services to the homeless since 1982. Last year at our shelter, we provided services to 469 people, 32 families with 53 children. So if I asked you to picture a typical resident, what image comes to mind? Take a moment and get a picture in your head. Did you picture someone like this, living on the street? Well, it's quite possible. We do see people coming into our shelter who have been living outside. But what about this? A mother and a child. Or this young woman. What about a young man? This young man is just barely older than a high school student, yet he's already out on his own. What about these little guys? With the exception of that first photo that I showed you, all of these people have recently stayed with us. The reality is people who are homeless look just like you and me. They may be serving your coffee in the morning or bagging your groceries at the end of the day. They might be cleaning the office where you work, or they might be driving a taxi. The child sitting next to your child in the classroom might be returning to a shelter at the end of the day. The point is, homelessness can and does happen to all types of people. We provide shelter to both individuals and families, and we operate at full capacity year-round, which often surprises people. Regardless of the weather, homelessness happens all the time. On any given night under our roof, we have close to 100 people, and they will be ranging in age from infants right up through senior citizens. So how do people become homeless? What are the causes? It's rarely just one thing that happens. It's typically a series of things. Some of the common causes are lack of resources. Money is almost always one of the issues. Breakups of a relationship or a severe traumatic event can cause someone to lose their housing. Alcohol and drug addiction. People are at all stages of recovery sometimes when they come to seek shelter from us. People with developmental disabilities, I've actually seen people dropped off at our front door because their caregiver is no longer able to care for them. There are people leaving prison who need a place to start over. And last, but certainly not least, are physical and mental illnesses, which are often untreated. So to explain a little bit better all of these challenges that people need to overcome and kind of the level of services that we need to provide to help them overcome those, I want to tell you 3 short stories. The first one is about a young man who stayed in a transitional shelter room like this one. He basically needed a place to get back on his feet. He had fallen on hard times. He had suffered from an alcohol addiction, but had since gotten sober. Now, in his case, he didn't have any major medical issues other than his alcoholism. He had education, he had experience, he had job history. As it turned out, he was a talented chef, and he easily found employment in our amazing town with so many restaurants. And he was able to get back on his feet and move out after only a couple of months. He just needed the time to save up enough money for his first month's rent and security deposit. So we gave him a place to do that, but he didn't need a lot from us other than a place to stay. And the next example I want to share is about a family. It was a 5-person family, 2 parents, 3 little girls under the age of 5, 2 of whom you see here. I believe that was a Halloween party we threw. They needed a lot of support to us. They came to us and they needed all sorts of services that we helped connect them to. We helped them get health insurance. The family needed both medical care and mental health care. And once supported, the family was able, both parents were able to go to work. They ended up, mom worked on her GED, and they got the kids in Head Start, and they took parenting classes, so they did a lot of work while they were with us. But here's the interesting thing. Once they went back to work and both parents were employed, they were still not earning enough money to afford a market rate apartment in our community. So they needed to put their names on a subsidized housing waiting list. Now, where we live here, those waiting lists are long. For a family, the wait to get a subsidized apartment is 6 months to 1 year. For an individual, it's 1 to 2 years. The good news is that this family was able to move out after just 6 months into an apartment that they were going to be able to afford. Now, the last story I want to share with you is about a gentleman I will call Leo. He represents the most challenging clients that we serve. Finding permanent housing for clients like him is particularly difficult because he was not going to be able to work. Even if someone is on disability, it's often not enough to afford housing. Now, his story, he was a 40-plus year veteran, had earned a Purple Heart, and showed up at our shelter. His last possession was his vehicle. One of the many things that we needed to do for him was help him surrender his driver's license and his car because it was unsafe for him to be driving. He, in addition to many medical conditions, also was suffering from dementia. So if you've ever gone through that with your own family member, having to have them surrender a license, you can imagine the difficulty of that. He had no family support with the exception of one brother who lived all the way on the other side of the country. So making decisions was very challenging. Eventually, after a full year, we were able to secure a bed for him in a veteran's home. But here's an interesting thing. When the time came for him to move out, he didn't want to leave. We had become his new family, his support. The people who work at our shelter and the other residents made him feel safe and comfortable. So we had to work extra hard to convince and support him in that move to a place where we knew that he was going to get the care that he really deserved. Now, the challenges for children who are homeless are unique. They grow up way too fast. You can imagine if a child is worrying about where they're going to sleep every night, how that could be a distraction and get in the way of their education and the work in the classroom. Truancy is also common among children who are homeless. Think about this, something as simple as a play date. I remember once a mother who was at our shelter shared a story with me. She was heartbroken that her children were not invited to play at other children's homes, and they certainly weren't coming back to the shelter for play dates. She wept as she told me this story. It was really heartbreaking for her. People just want their children to be treated like everybody else. The challenges for older children are also unique. There's the shame and embarrassment of being homeless. Being a teenager is hard enough without the instability and poverty of homelessness. We try very hard to provide for the needs of children of all ages at our shelter. We want them to be able to participate with their peers on sporting teams and going to summer camp, and if it means getting them a dress or a tuxedo to go to the prom, we can do those things for them. But the most important thing we can do is provide them with a stable, safe home to go home to every night. When people first arrive at a shelter, they are typically exhausted. They are so relieved to simply be in a place where they can sleep safely. We treat all of the people who come to us with dignity and respect, and for some people, it's been a very long time since they've been welcomed into an environment where they know they can relax, rest, and recharge. The change that we see in people after only a couple days can be quite remarkable. Once people are rested, we connect them with our case managers. We have social workers that work individually with every person that stays with us at our shelter. Shelters are so much more than just places where people sleep and eat. Our case managers are working with people to set goals with them and figure out how they're going to meet those goals, creating a customized plan around housing and employment, and helping them overcome some very basic benefits. Think about this. What if you had absolutely no identification to prove who you were? One of the things we often have to start with when we work with people is helping them get a photo ID, a birth certificate, a social security card. All of those things are necessary before we can help them move on to connect to getting employment and housing and other benefits that they may need. We're very fortunate at our shelter that we have spaces where our amazing partner agencies can come on site to deliver the supportive services that our residents need. Our residents can access primary health care, dental care, mental health care, and substance abuse counseling, all without the barriers of transportation and cost. They come right to us under our roof. And while we offer a tremendous number of services, and we're very proud of our outcomes, last year 80% of our families transitioned successfully to permanent housing. We know that we can do better. Last year in November, an amazing group of community members got together for a summit on homelessness. This was organized by the Greater Seacoast Coalition to End Homelessness, of which I'm a member. And we got together and gathered the community together to help us talk about what are the greatest challenges that we face in the work that we are doing. Out of this day-and-a-half summit, we identified 9 priorities that will now drive the work of our coalition for the next 3 to 5 years. Just to give you a quick example of one of the priorities that we're so excited we've already started working on is something called a community care team that we've seen implemented in other communities successfully. What this is a group of people coming together to look at the people who are frequently cycling through emergency rooms and creating a customized plan to deal not only with their medical needs, but their housing needs as well. So we're already having conversations with the local hospitals about this. We'll keep working to improve identifying these priorities, but in the meantime, direct service providers will continue to deliver care to the most vulnerable people in our community, but we can't do it alone. There are several ways you can help. Every shelter has a wish list of items. You can go on the website and check out the things that we need. You may have some in your home already, or you could get some things while you're out shopping and drop them off. Most shelters rely on private contributions to fund their operations. At our shelter, 3/4 of our entire budget comes from private donations from individuals and businesses. Another way you can help is that government funding can be volatile, and for those that cannot personally give, you can advocate among your legislators to help support the funding for shelters that provide such a critical safety net. The last suggestion is to volunteer. We have an amazing group of volunteers who come in 7 nights a week to cook and serve dinner for our residents. There also may be opportunities to participate in future community meetings like I mentioned earlier. All of these suggestions will have an impact, the theme of today's talks, for people like this little boy and so many others. Don't underestimate the power of your involvement. Without you, shelters would not exist, and thousands of people would go uncared for and unsheltered. When you go home tonight to the safety and comfort of your own home, my hope is that you'll reflect on what you've heard and not be overwhelmed or saddened, but instead be grateful for what you have and be inspired and motivated to take some kind of action. Despite the magnitude of the problem, you can make a difference, and together we can break the cycle of homelessness and transform lives. Thank you.